good evening to everyone who's joined us today. I'm Richard Chaudhary, representing Events with Shaun and General Counsel 360, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's virtual roundtable discussion on supply chain and third-party ethics in APAC. We will be discussing key ethics risks in supply chain and contractual control and how to build ethical culture across third party. I'd like to invite our moderator, SERENA to introduce herself and take over the discussion from here. Over to you, SERENA. SERENA?
SERENA, you're on mute.
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So welcome to our panel on supply chain ethics and in APAC. So today I'm very privileged in order to be the moderator with all our very talented and reputable panelists. And I'm SERENA. I'm working for Puerto Rico, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Work leading spirits and champagne company. If you drink Shibat or you salute a Valentine, you will know this company. So the first, I would like to introduce our panel. So I will give you the name, and each panelist please introduce a bit about yourself. So I will do it in alphabet order. So please DEEPAK ANEJA. He is the General Counsel and Company Secretary of DENSO. This gives some introduction about you.
Hi. Good morning, good afternoon to all the panelists and the attendees. Thank you, SERENA. So I'm DEEPAK ANEJA. I work for DENSO as a General Counsel and Company Secretary. Basically working for automobile industry and having more than 20 years of experience in the field of legal compliance and corporate governance. So looking forward to hear and learn from each other during this roundtable. Thank you, SERENA.
Yeah, of course, it's your expertise in sanction compliance, enterprise risk management will help us a lot in this panelist discussion. And the second one will be Deven Chitaliya. So he is the global head, ethical business program and legal compliance of LL.M Agri. So Deven, can you give some introduction?
Yeah, hi SERENA and hi fellow panelists. My name is Deven. I represent a company called LL.M Agri. It's part of the LL.M group. We are based out of Singapore. We are essentially into agriculture product supply chain, midstream processing and upstream plantations, etc. selectively. We operate into 50 plus countries listed in Singapore and essentially only focusing on agri products as such. My role with LL.M goes long back, 15 years. I was heading the risk management functions earlier, enterprise risk, trading, credit, counterparty risk, operational risks, etc. All the trading risks. For last 3 years, post restructuring, I have now shifted to legal compliance role, looking after what we call it ethical business program in terms of sanctions, anti-money laundering, AML, fraud, all those areas, including training, including employee support wherever we are dealing on a complex business structures. So that's my role for now, and I'm looking forward to share my thoughts about the specific areas for discussion today, and also understand other perspectives as well. Thank you.
Yes. Of course, we are very excited in order to listen to your experience in audit framework and multi-jurisdictional enforcement. So the third panelist is the Herumurti Sutaryo. He is the General Counsel of Cinemas-Land. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really an honor for me to have in these sessions, and then the organizer reaching me out. I've been through a lot of across different industries. I spent like more than decades in ICT, including AI, and then move along to the electronic goods consumptions, and then move along to the tobaccos, and here I am in the Sharma land. Basically, I'm the GC for the International Investment, Technology, and Emerging Business. So that means including renewable energy, fiber optics, FNBs, and EVs and all that. So really looking forward to have this great discussion this afternoon from everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Herumurti. And the fourth panelist is Samir Chugh. He is the General Counsel of Game 24/7, and he is the expert of gaming industry compliance. Hello, Samir.
Hi. Thank you for kind of having me here as a panelist. Good afternoon or good morning to everybody. So I'm Samir Chugh. I work for a gaming company. I'm the Chief Legal Officer for Play Games 24/7. Been in the online gaming industry now for about the last 3.5 years. But prior to that, been a lawyer and been around for about 30 years, having worked with some of the large conglomerates in India and abroad. So I've worked with a company called NCR, Cummins, and British Telecom, including being based in London as well as Hong Kong. I have worked with the SR Group and the Bharti Group, which is the largest telecom group in India and Africa. And so I think, experienced a lot of these ethics, etc. issues, but clearly I think I'm here to share whatever my learnings are, but more so to be here, be part of the panel and learn a lot more.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samir. The next will be Shaun Lee. He is the dispute resolution partner of Bird & Bird ATMD firm. So please, Shaun Lee. Hello, Shaun Lee. So he has some technical issue. We will make Shaun Lee later. So Yixin Tan, our beautiful panelist. So,
thank you, Serena. Yes, so hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody on the call. So I'm Yixin. I'm the Senior Legal Counsel for Reckitt Benckiser. Reckitt Benckiser is the manufacturer of some of the world's most loved brands that you use every day. So we own Durex, we own Dettol, we own Lysol, we own Strepsils and Gaviscon, and a range of other healthcare and household products. So I manage sort of end-to-end from procurement and factories through to commercial transactions. For Reckitt, I manage the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam businesses.
Yeah.
Thank you, Serena.
Yeah, thank you, Yixin. And of course, we are very excited to learn from you how to have the supplier risk management and contractual governance. And Shaun Lee, so he is a dispute resolution partner. We lost you, so now your turn. And he is a dispute resolution partner at Bird & Bird AGMD. So can you give us some introduction about you? Shaun Lee? Okay, so we will continue, and Shaun Lee will give his introduction when come to his part relating to the challenge. So in fact, today we will explore 3 critical challenges shaping the industry of supply chains and ethics in APAC. So the first one will be identifying and mitigating third-party ethics failure. The second will be ethics clauses, contractual control, and audit readiness. And the third one will be building ethical culture across supplier and distributor. So our goal is very exhaustive in order to talk about all things relating to the compliance checklist, but we discuss practical strategy that work in APAC's diverse and fast-moving markets. Is okay? Okay. So for the first challenge, we will talk about identifying and mitigating third-party ethics failures. And as you know already, ethics failures in global supply chains have led to billions in fines and reputational damage. And in 2024, as TD Bank paid $3 billion for AML failure, anti-money laundering failures, and Boeing faced renewed scrutiny over safety and compliance breaches. These often stem from weak onboarding and poor monitoring, especially in fragmented APAC markets. And so for this session, I would like to ask you, DEEPAK, the General Counsel and Company Secretary of LENSO, So what patterns or warning signs should company watch for in your experience? Can you share a case study in order to let us know how do you balance big and thoroughness when vetting third party and in your role and in your experience?
Hi, thank you, Serena, for this opportunity. So, being the first panelist, it's a bit good and bad both. So, if we talk about like warning signs, na, so my feeling is there is never we can never say it is delayed to check what is going wrong in the organization. So basically, I would like to divide the stages into three parts. First is when we are onboarding the vendors. Then second is when it is a continuous working with the vendor. And then third part is when it is all payment and all those stuff going to the vendor. So specifically talking about the first part, which is very critical, onboarding the vendor. So that time, being a legal counsel, we can sense that what is going behind the mind of the people who are proposing for any vendor. So once we see that someone is pushing for a vendor and trying to compromise in the contractual clauses, specifically relating to indemnification or liability of the vendor, then we can have a warning sign if I say that, okay, there's possibility of some red flags there, which should be taken care. So that gives a sense on that part. Then if some vendor is actually politically influential, and it is known that such is a politically influential vendor, so then there's a high possibility that it is not that he is coming based on his actual skills or something, but he is coming or trying to get into the organization by using such political influence. Then another part at the time of onboarding can be some back track record of the vendor. If he has been indulged into violation of the laws like environmental laws or other social security laws, or if the vendor is having a track record of being penalized for such things, so then it becomes a big red signal to onboard such vendor. So that is at the time of when we are onboarding the vendor. Then if we go forward at the stage when we are dealing with the vendor, so if at that time we want to see the warning signals, they can be like one vendor each time getting the award from the company. So that gives a sense that, okay, it need to be checked whether he is truly deserving vendor who is getting the awards every consecutive years, or it is just because of some preferential treatment is being given to that vendor. So that can be one example. Or there can be like in the supply chain, if we see sometimes the quality of products what we receive from the vendor are not matching to the standards, but still continuously such products are accepted by the receiving people. So that type of issue comes mainly with the production control team. So like first part, onboarding part is mainly with the procurement team. Then second stage, then procurement as well as production control team. If they have a bad intention to collaborate negatively, then such type of things happen. Quality issues are getting ignored, which is a big risk, specifically if we talk about automobile sector. Quality is basically big no compromise. And for our company, it is specifically like that. So that is one of the big warning signals. And if we see the routine business cycle, when the issue comes regarding the payments or something, so there is the possibility that vendor is issuing duplicate invoices again and again. So once or twice, it is understandable. There can be a mistake or something. But if there's a specific vendor who is having a tendency to issue the duplicate invoices, then that is a big red flag. So then it can be a collusion between the procurement, production control, as well as the finance team. So that type of things give a big warning and alarm that, okay, something need to be checked and it should not go like that. So I think like that, I would like to categorize at each stage what could be the warning signals for the vendor for such non or non-compliant vendors.
Yeah. So thank you very much, DEEPAK. And for Yixin, so what are the practical steps can the procurement teams take to detect ethics risk early in your experience as an in-house counsel? And for you, in your experience and even until now, what tools or processes should company apply in order to have the identifying and mitigating risks of supply chain?
Okay, so thank you so much, SERENA and DEEPAK, for the sharing. So I think for me, building on what DEEPAK has said about knowing who your vendors are, knowing who you're working with, actually one key thing as Reckitt has refined its compliance process over the years is that I find engaging with the third parties, whether they are your suppliers or your customers and your vendors directly, is actually quite helpful. I find that a lot of the compliance programs and questionnaires, if they are sent directly to the third party you engage with, you get better quality of answers and you get a better read of how they operate and what they do. So especially, I think one key change we made years ago was to avoid sort of a checklist questionnaire style box. Yes, no answers, I think, didn't give you a lot of insight into the ways of working. I think sometimes just setting up a more open-ended kind of form, not very long, a one-pager or even half a pager, asking open-ended questions about how do you engage with government inspections? How do you manage? Do you have frequent audits of your various processes? And when the answers come back, obviously it takes a bit more engagement with the quality of the answers, right? But you get a better sensing and view of what their ethics standards are, whether you have a better understanding of where they stand and whether you need to engage them further or probe them a little bit further. SERENA, I think the second question about tools, and I just maybe leave for the rest of the panel as well to provide their views. I think in Asia, my experience is a lot of tools are somewhat patchy and you can't totally rely on all of the tools. For language purposes, coverage purposes, I think there is no one perfect tool that you can rely on 100% to do the background checks and the data checks for you, because all of these things need to be updated over time. So one other mechanism that a company could introduce as part of the compliance process is if you have like a whistleblower or a speak up process. And then that gives you a way to not just rely on the tools, which are helpful, but also to garner sort of on the ground information from the whichever local country that you're managing, if you make it clear that there is that direct access of communication. So those are the two, I think, tools and engagement processes that I find have been quite helpful.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting. In talk about the tool, I do agree with you that the tool cannot be perfect. One cannot be perfect and well tailored for all the businesses. And so that's why we will need one person is the external counsel, like Shirley. Shirley, can you give some introduction about you, because you missed twice, you missed 2 times to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. So sorry about that. Had some issues with Zoom. Hi, my name is Shaun Lee. I'm a partner with a international law firm, the Singapore office of the international law firm Bird & Bird. I am primarily a contentious regulatory and dispute resolution lawyer. What this means is that whenever there is a problem that requires some kind of investigations, that requires external counsel to be onboarded, whether for privilege issues or to deal with the regulators, well, we are there for you. So sorry, my apologies, Serena. So is there any specific questions you'd like me to address at this juncture?
Yeah, thank you, Shani. So you had about the sharing of DEEPAK and Yixin. We talk about the internal tools. We talk about the internal controller and management, how to identify and mitigate the risk. And from your experience as the external counsel and investigator perspective, so can you share top tips or concerns when you deal with domestic and foreign regulators in terms of supply chain and ethics, and what are some of the issues you all face in this kind of matter?
Yes. So thank you, Serena. I think this is a very important question, and I start with the basic premise: APAC is a very diverse jurisdiction. So just looking at Australia, New Zealand, there is a culture that you will deal with that is slightly more akin to what you will find in Western Europe, very loosely called, right? On the other hand, you have ASEAN. And even within ASEAN, and even speaking specifically about Singapore, Singapore is considered to be one of the most westernized countries within ASEAN. And there's a certain expectation that when you come to Singapore, you can somehow adopt the very same kind of approaches that you would adopt, say, in any other Commonwealth jurisdiction or in the UK, specifically London itself. But the thing is, a good chunk of what we do within Singapore is that Singapore is still a very Asian country. And one of the biggest difficulties we face when operating, investigating within ASEAN, within the Greater China region, within the broader Asia, East Asian region, within the very large Asian region, is that jurisdiction matters. And when I say jurisdiction matters, I do mean certain things like 1, language and culture; 2, issues of privilege; and 3, things like confidentiality and national security laws. And all of that basically becomes very encapsulated and becomes very problematic in some ways when you're dealing with local regulators. And why I say this is because regulators, even within a certain jurisdiction, tend to take or can take very diverse approaches. So to give one example, a regulator in Singapore is going to behave relatively differently from a regulator in Hong Kong, from a regulator in Australia, from a regulator in certain parts of Asia or within East Asia. Things like, for example, will the regulators accept limited waivers of privilege? So if you correspond with regulators and you want to basically provide them with information on the understanding that this is basically the investigations you have done, these are the findings you have made, and these findings basically may tend to show or put the company in a bad light, or may tend to show that your internal ethics guidelines and policies, or your internal dealings with certain third-party suppliers have not been quite up to scratch. The question is, can I basically inform the regulators without the regulators subsequently using the exact same information against the company in subsequent legal proceedings? So privilege is a big issue, and regulators have different approaches to this issue of whether or not you can even waive privilege for the very limited portion of an investigation. And this translates in a situation whereby privilege is very domestic. So when you're dealing with multiple regulators, you might find yourself dealing with multiple issues of privilege. So I did a very big multi-jurisdictional FCPA investigations. And one of the things that we had to be very conscious about is the US DOJ had a specific policy. There was US counsel, and US counsel had a view of privilege which was not quite aligned with the issue, with how we approach privilege in Singapore, Malaysia, parts of Eastern Europe, or even in China itself. Things like investigations also play a very big role. For example, are you able to access information remotely from the jurisdiction in which you're doing the investigations, or do you basically have to send somebody to or on the ground to basically access the information or to even interview the person? Similarly, when you interview the person, are the interview transcriptions even privileged? And must the interviewer be somebody who is legally trained a qualified local lawyer, or will it suffice to be an in-house counsel? All of these issues basically come into play when you have a investigations or when you're dealing with domestic and foreign regulators. The final thing, I don't want to take too much time, is are you even obliged to respond to foreign regulator in the first place? Now, under basic premise, the basic tenets of public international law would say that as a local company, you are not obliged, and a foreign regulator has no powers of coercion and cannot compel you to provide information, cannot compel you to basically give interviews, cannot compel you to give information. But at the same time, we know that there are certain jurisdictions around the world, perhaps in the more recent history, which have exerted long-arm jurisdiction. And that becomes a problem, because how do you deal with the fact that you are operating globally? Your suppliers may be operating globally, and you're basically facing issues in those foreign jurisdictions. And even if the local regulators are not looking at you, you know that the foreign regulators could have an impact on your operations in that foreign jurisdiction. So I'm going to leave it at that, because I'm also quite curious to hear from my fellow panelists as to what their views are when it comes to dealing with regulators across multi-jurisdictional issues.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shirley. I can see that you're very passionate talking about investigator. And then I think that you really enjoy your job. So as we just go through the challenge one, how to mitigate and how to investigate the risk before it becomes the risk, right? So then when we talk about the tools, Yixin shared that it's not the perfect tool for all the businesses. So that's why we have one tool that all our will agree that is the most effective tool in our hand as a lawyer, that is a contract, right? It's a contract. So the front line, the first front line we have, the first tool we have in our hands as a lawyer is a contract. So contracts and audits are frontline tools for ethical governance. And in APAC, regulatory complexity is rising. That's why EU and German laws recently, they require monitoring indirect supplier in Asia as well. And non-compliance in some cases can lead to fines up to €1 million or global turnover. So that's why we have the very crucial demand and request in order to have the respect of ethics in supply chain. However, only 25% of board now regularly discuss supply chain risk in the board meeting. That is it's not my data, it's the data from the report of International Supply Chain Report in 2024. So in terms of this, Deven, the Global Health, Ethical Business Program, and Legal Compliance of L.L.M, can you share with us some example of neutral language that you used in the contracts to avoid triggering local legal issue? And in fact, when we work with, like you, a general counsel, we work with a lot of affiliates in local markets. So how do you navigate conflicting sanctions law when we're working with supplier in many jurisdictions, especially the very complex jurisdiction like China? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Serena. So I think some good
Can you open
discussions.
loudly a bit, Deven? It's a bit small.
Is it better? No.
Yeah, it's better. It's better. Thank you.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yes, it's better now. Thank you.
Okay. This is the maximum near I can be to my microphone.
Yeah.
So I think APAC per se is, it represents a fragmented, regulatory landscape overall, with, as Shaun was also mentioning, many jurisdictions, although aligned with global sanction regime like UN, US, or UK, etc. But there are some explicit material, examples where, certain jurisdictions does not kind of comply or align with the developed countries. Let's say take an example of China. So in fact, China has a anti-foreign sanction law put in place, that penalizes its own companies plus the foreign companies working in China who are complying with foreign sanctions and therefore not dealing with Chinese entities. So that's something which is anti-sanction. This creates definitely a reputational risk, legal risk, especially for multinational firms like Olam, where we are operating in multiple jurisdictions, including China, in a material way. So I'll just take an example, quick one. We have actually, in fact, we are working live on a forced labor risk in Xinjiang region of China for our cotton business. So there, I think the issue is that how to continue dealing with such an important jurisdiction of China without breaching any of the sanctions regulations, either at US, UK, EU level, or on the opposite side, even within China, because we operate within China as well. So I think from contractual clause perspective, I would say, we need to use neutral or broad languages for counterparties for the countries like China as much as possible. We should avoid referencing to specific foreign sanctions regimes. Let's say we should not use specific words like US sanctions in the contract with Chinese entities. And we should also involve a lot of, local legal counsel, in the process to define such terminologies and the clauses. I would just take a few examples of, the kind of clause or the sentences that I'll just take a few examples. So we can use something like compliance with applicable laws and regulations in our contract as a phrase. So this allows flexibility across jurisdictions without referencing foreign law directly, right? We can even put in that international trade and compliance obligations instead of putting a specific thing. So this captures the spirit of sanctions compliance without naming specific regimes, right? And then we can even say something like no engagement with entities subject to restrictions under applicable international standards. So again, it's a bit way broader, but it is not kind of amounting to breaching any of the sanctions on either side. So we have to be a bit clever in terms of how we kind of use our contractual terms to ensure that we are able to sail through, especially the multinational companies on both the sides of this geopolitics, that we have to kind of look into. Yeah.
Okay, so that one is quite interesting in order to see that it's not easy in order to have enforcement in China, right? So in terms of it means that we talk about the mitigating and identifying the risk. Can you share some case study or experience relating to the business of Olam in China? Because it cannot be enforceable, are very difficult. So that's why it's better to have a mitigate and identifying, right?
So I think, sorry.
Like China cotton business, I heard about this. Yeah.
So that's for me, right? Serene? Okay.
Yeah.
So just to kind of, in terms of the mitigating things, I think very important that we have, certain processes put in place properly. Let's say I'll take an example of, we should ensure that we have signed ethics clauses and declarations from all our supplier customer in a particular geography. Again, as I said, customized languages can be used. Then internally, we can train our people and we can audit and we can put an audit trail for the training on the sanctions that we are imparting with our own team. And we should also regularly ensure that we have a backup of due diligence report, risk assessments, external law firm opinions, etc. In terms of the preparedness for any audit that any regulatory authorities would like to do on your businesses at a later stage. Yeah. Then, I think involvement of more and more of local teams that are there is also very important. And to ensure that there is enough of balance between ethics clause, and the regulatory framework is something I would say is important for us. And again, the same example which I've given earlier on China cotton is the apt one, where we have to kind of ensure that we have different legal systems, different cultural norms, and different regulatory expectations being kind of balanced out in a proper way. Serena?
Yeah, thank you, Deven. And for Samuel, can I ask you some question? Because you are an expert of technology law, especially in digital platform. So for you, what are the typical contractual precautions that must be taken? Do you think that indemnities help, and in what circumstances?
Yeah. No, sure, sir. Thank you. And I think, kind of some of the earlier panelists kind of that Deven put it very aptly in terms of the various things that can be done. I think, contract becomes the most crucial part. And the reason why I say that is because while I think, generally business is done on intent, and we all, kind of being lawyers, we are always trying to be business lawyers. But it's when the disputes happen, when the problems happen, is when people pick up the contracts. And when the contracts are picked up, that time you cannot say that, oh, I looked at it from a business perspective, and I was trying to enable the business to happen, because when things go wrong, then that time, kind of that's not an excuse. So therefore, it's important to have legally enforceable contracts, and I'll kind of split them like Deven did, and I'll kind of split that into two parts. One being, kind of domestic, when you're getting into, say, an, kind of contract with an entity, a third party entity, which is in the same jurisdiction, and one in different jurisdictions. I think if I were to talk about the same jurisdiction first, clearly, I think, the first thing I would want the third party entity to give us proper representations and warranties to state, and so that they are representing, they're warranting what they will do and how they will do, because it's important that at the end of the day, when they are the ones who are taking certain actions which can come back and kind of have an impact on the company, you will want them to make sure that they've stated that it will all be done in a proper manner, because tomorrow if things go wrong, then you can kind of go and enforce it, not just as a breach, but also as a breach of the rep and warranty that they gave. That's one. The second part I would definitely want is that which automatically follows as indemnities, that should something happen because of then at least from the perspective of indemnities or from the perspective of losses, the company is, kind of covered fully. But these are in a way, I would say now, one is a more proactive clause that you need, and the second is really a reactive, and you'll have to react to that clause when the breach happens. But there's a whole lot of things in between that are there, and then that to me is the fact that kind of when we are talking about the way the third party is supposed to turn around and provide you with these services, etc. I think it is also important that we turn around and actually clearly put rights like right to audit. Okay, their obligations on compliance with the laws and the policies, right? Then the third thing that I think I would also want there is that if there are any breaches, because at the end of the day, it could be that there is a certain breach, but that breach is not actually because of their willful default. It could also happen that something beyond control happened. Therefore, in such situations, there must be a notification requirement. That if there is a certain breach that has happened, let's say, for example, and I'll take it to an extreme, is that a third party vendor turns around and actually has a certain employee who has gone and then turned around and done something unethical, despite having been told that cannot do such things, right? And an individual as an employee did it on their own. Then it is important for that third party to come back and disclose saying this is what has happened. And if they really want to distance themselves from that employee or that person, then it is important that they come out, because at the end of the day, the liability will not just fall on us as a company, it will also fall on them as a vendor. And therefore, even they will need to be protected. The other, clause that I would also want to put in there is I would want the third party vendors to turn around and take appropriate insurances, to turn around and make sure that any such thing happens, at least both the parties are protected. And then, the other one more clause would be that a right to audit, because what happens is that we turn around and take representations, we take warranties, and then tomorrow the contract continues to play. The fact is, we don't know how the performance of the contract is happening on a day-to-day basis. Therefore, a right to audit and an actual audit must be done every now and then, because that is what, and you could do it periodically, say a quarter or every 6 months. So maybe you could take a declaration every quarter and do an audit every 6 months to make sure that there is compliance and there is no unethical practice that is being done there. And then, of course, lastly, I mean, well, there are many other clauses, but to keep it short and to, kind of focus here, I would say the whole confidentiality and the data protection, because that is one area where I think the biggest, concerns or issues really raised. And also all these clauses must be drafted and put very clearly, including with how they will actually be implemented, except just having just clauses into a contract.
It's very useful. It's very useful information. We just want to share when we talk about indemnity, it's not easy in order to prove what is the damage, right? I don't know in the other countries, but in Vietnam, so indemnity is not recognized legally. Officially and legally, indemnity is not recognized. We just recognize compensation.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's why it's just in order to say that the role of the lawyers and especially the legal counsel, in-house counsel like us, is very important in order to navigate the laws and the conflict between the jurisdictions. So, and in terms of it, and following what Samir talking about the compliance tool, I would like to ask you a question, Herumurti. That is for you, what does a robust yet practical compliance protocol look like? And do you think that, or can you share if you have one example, it is not confidential, where proactive auditing help to prevent a major compliance or liability issue in terms of supply chains and ethics?
All right. Thank you, Serena. Thank you for the time. If I could just resonate a little bit from all the previous speakers' point of view by far, and then, sort of giving my little bit of contributions to that. In terms of, I mean, I'm going to jump into that, your point just now mentioned after that. So having relationship with the vendor is really complete of art, meaning you really have to do the proper KYC. And then that means you just go all the way, because I don't know in any other jurisdictions, but in Indonesia, indemnifications, yes, it's good when it's written down properly, and then it's well simulated from any angles, right? Dengan what if, then what if not scenario. But eventually, we do recognize what's so-called vicarious liability, whereby the company who hire or engage the particular vendor gotta have to be exposed to certain liability as well, particularly when it comes to the criminal case. When it comes to the civil, yes, arguably that can be taken care of by the agreements, because well, in Indonesia, it's very clear. Like when I was being taught back in the law school in my undergrad, it says that law is a political product. So what it means, the needs for one company to be able to navigate and understanding the cultures, the geopoliticals of that countries, and then the kind of lobbying or approach is going to be taken. And that's really matters the most. Yes, for that, I believe that, as in-house lawyer, we just got to engage with our colleagues from risk management, maybe, to make sure they do the proper all this. And then, so back to your questions, where does the robust yet and practical compliance protocol look like in APAC? So I do believe I share completely Shaun's point of view, APAC is really diverse. So you couldn't afford not to understand how the mechanics works in each and every countries, what's the cultural backgrounds and the characteristic, and then all these kind of things. That's really important. And then I couldn't. Another thing that really important is to make sure the information overloading to the business, to the business, meaning as the legal counsels or legal in-house, we just got to be present, to the business, keep reminding them in the form of trainings or awareness, what's in it for the business, why, what's in it for them, and should they follow, listen up to their legals got to say. I mean, it's got to be concrete enough in a way that they're willingly to collaborate and act to that point. That's really important. I remember that one time when I was working in the tobacco companies. Yes, we do have a really good engagement to our dealership. So meaning we require all the area sales manager to literally spend the time with the family of the dealers. So not only the owner of the dealer, it's shop itself, but also to the family. And then we also provide them a proper holiday and so on, bonuses and everything. But out of the blue, we got a news came from London, which is from the European Tobacco Commissions, whereby obviously our product from ANEJA landed in that market. And of course, this just triggers to a lot of things, really. From the, from the product liability itself, from the intellectual property, ethical and social trade policies, treaties, and all this kind of stuff. Everything just comes into play. So yes, we launched our internal investigations back then, and it turns out this product somehow managed to be shipped from the off-the-grid harbor somewhere in the eastern part of Indonesia. And we're talking about big quantity of cigarettes, like in the size of the containers kind of things. So yes, we received the fine from the European Tobacco Commissions for several million pounds back then. And then our investigations is a very thorough, very, very thorough. We get to the bottom of it, and then thank God we managed to get away with just small fractures of it. But then again, there's a lot of lesson learned in this case, really. Being really close to our dealers or our logistics supply channels, that's really one thing. But it doesn't stop us from sort of like personalizing the relationship. I know this going to be sounds a little bit, who's going to do that? Who's going to have the allocation of time and everything? But I think it's fair to say that in different jurisdictions, things tends to work differently.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's interesting. And then, honestly, I would like to talk more about what is the penalty or the fine you already face in terms of real estate, in terms of infrastructure, real estate supply chain failure of ethics. But then maybe another day we will come back later. So when we say that is we talk about even you, Herumurti, and any panelists here, we see the culture. The culture is quite very important when we talk about any protocol, any process, and any tool to be applicable to a business. So I would like to ask Shaun relating to the audits. and the impact of the culture. Because the supplier may come from the many different countries. And for you, how you advise, what you advise to your client, how for them to prepare suppliers for audits without damaging trust.
So, thank you, Serena. And if I may, I would like to basically just touch on something that Samir brought up regarding audit rights. And one of the things that we find makes audits easier is if the suppliers understand that this is part and parcel of what the client needs to do. And it's not that we are signaling out a specific supplier or because we suspect a specific supplier has issues. So when Samir talks about audits being relatively routine, when Samir talks about audits being something which is part and parcel of that long-term valuable relationship and collaboration between the client and the supplier, that makes a whole host of difference. And I draw back to something that you said, Serena, which is the issue of culture. For better or for worse, when I get involved in audit matters, it invariably is because there is a fight. What specifically happens is the client has very sophisticated audit rights. These are audit rights which basically very clearly sets out when you can conduct an audit, what kind of cooperation you need, when you need to respond, who shall perform the audit, and even things like cost. And one of the things that we find about cost is if the client is willing to accept and bear the cost for the supplier, and unless you find that there is some kind of non-compliance, severe material non-compliance on the supplier side, that tends to help mitigate any kind of resistance to audits. But yet there is resistance. And whenever I get involved, it's unfortunate because there is a severe amount of resistance. So where we find resistance occurring is because of a few factors. One, because they see it as basically a foreign party trying to interfere with how they do things in that domestic market. Now, if you're talking about a customer-supplier relationship, arguably the client here or the customer here has the stronger bargaining power, and the supplier may have no choice but to accept the audits. But at the same time, when you don't have that situation, or where a supplier sees this as an unwelcome, over-intrusive infringement of the kind of business relationship they have, that is where you have a lot of problems. And culture becomes very important. Because if the culture of the supplier or the culture of the counterparty is to resist all forms of audit because it is not appropriate, because it is not done, because it is not market standard, it becomes a massive problem. And I would actually love to hear from fellow panelists, both in-house and those, well, mostly in-house. How do they deal with a situation here? Because very often when I act for a customer that wants to do an audit, what we find is that it is almost impossible to do or perform an audit without voluntary compliance. And I'm thinking about fields as diverse as plantations, commodities, agribusinesses, tech companies, right? The most extreme one is where a supplier told us, no, you can't perform an audit because you have to basically go to 10 different plantations and they're all scattered around, one particular jurisdiction or two jurisdictions. It's going to take basically a few months, and I can't basically I can't have my employees support you in this because you can't compensate me for that kind of cost. So, as I said, I fully hear where Samir comes from. Strong, clear audit rights are important. Serena, I also agree with you. A culture of compliance and a willingness to basically engage in what is seen to be routine and perfectly normal audit processes is key to any kind of building, maintaining the trust within the companies. But at the end of the day, I will be quite honest here. Do you or does the company have the willingness to basically pull the metaphorical trigger? If you're not willing to terminate, it doesn't matter how robust your audit rights and termination clauses are. If you're not willing to go to arbitration or go to court to compel a party to permit your third-party auditors to come in, same problem arises. So I say this not because I'm trying to get more business, but it's simply because I see way too many situations whereby a company can have the most robust documentation, but push comes to shove, there is little appetite. Not always at the compliance side, but quite often the business side, to basically incur the cost of an expense of doing or going through with an audit, because you're going to go through some kind of legal process even before the audit starts.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shani. It's just that I have an open question for all the panelists, and you can share among us. That is because we talk about the role of mitigating, identifying, and then using contract and using compliance protocol inside the company, like the internal tool, in order to control or to manage the risk of supply chains and ethics. So what is the role of the board director in this kind of subject? So can you share from your perspective, your experience at your current role? So how the role of the board director can help this?
I think maybe SERENA, I can take this because this is somewhat related to the third topic about culture building.
Yeah.
And then I have some insight. So I think your board of directors, your executive management is crucial. Depending, of course, on which function, because I manage everything from supply through to commercial, there are different leadership teams at Reckitt that manage these two functions. So I think from Shaun's point about audits, and plantations and commodities, I think my supply team and the compliance team make it a point to impress on our leadership that this is crucial. So in the conversations from supply leadership, when they come down from the UK and they meet our latex suppliers in Thailand and Malaysia, and our raw material suppliers around the world, I think the compliance issues and ethics issues are always up for discussion. And that sets the tone from the top, right? Because usually in Asia, these are big meetings, calendars are blocked, lunches are booked, function rooms are closed off, and it sets the tone. If your leadership team is aligned, it sets the tone from a head-to-head perspective with your suppliers that this is something they need to look into. Of course, this is a long-term game and a long-term investment, right? Depending on who you are and who your suppliers are to you. And I think the expectation that they can change their processes and their values overnight is not very realistic. But I think if you have the buy-in from leadership, that flows through their leadership as well. And then you can hopefully see some progress in a lot of difficult issues for like forced labor or bonded labor here. Any human trafficking issues as well. That's still quite not really spoken of, but still happens in the region, especially for commodities. And I think what we've also tried to do is to give, again, from a top to top perspective and acknowledging Asian culture, is to give some kind of like, it sounds very trite, but almost like progress award or sustainability, human right conditions, to engage on a level where we kind of affirm their efforts, right? Some people may say you're just applying lipstick, to something that isn't very pretty, right? You're just adding a little bit and make it look, but sometimes it also signals a tone shift with your suppliers and vendors, and again, going to that long-term investment point, you have to find different means beyond the audit, beyond the contractual provisions, to signal that this is something we find important, something we hope that they take seriously, and we will continuously engage in all the different conversations with our suppliers and vendors about these sorts of issues.
Yeah. So it's you true that that I'm in the transition to the challenge tree, building culture across supplier and distributor. And you say that is the role of the board director is very crucial because back is that they will build up the compliance culture, let's say the ethical and compliance culture in an enterprise, and they are the one who have a cascade on the spirit of compliance embedded in daily operation of the business. So for DEEPAK, so can you share with us what are the strategy that you already experienced can mitigate risk from geopolitical shifts or cybersecurity? Because I know that you are the expert in compliance technology and evolving trade policy in this 5.0 era or 4.0 era with the blooming of technology. DEEPAK, it's okay for you? No technical issue?
But it seems some it's a long time listening to all the panelists, so seems my mic freeze a little bit. Okay, so Serena, can you one time please repeat the just last part of your question?
Yeah, I would like to ask you what strategies in your experience that can mitigate risk from geopolitical shifts or cybersecurity threats involving trade policy in the era of technology, booming technology. Yeah.
Okay, so going about the geopolitical risk, so I think nowadays each business is facing that Trump era geopolitical risks are quite obvious, and I think here what is happening is in case we are relying on single source or a single country, then it becomes more severe. So such reliance keeping for any single source vendor or a single country for any supplies, so makes this risk more severe. So not in the past, but as of now, the strategy is to have the multiple sources to avoid the geopolitical risks. That is one of the key, what I will say specifically regarding the geopolitical risks, which are quite prevalent nowadays. And if we talk about the cybersecurity, so now if we see that data privacy or personal data and big data, those are the things in the business which we are talking more and more. And so these things are coming from European nations. But in ASEAN region, or if we say APAC, then these things are now considered very important aspect. Even one virus spread in a customer or a vendor have a big impact on all your operations, and you need to keep it shut for maybe not few hours or few days, but maybe longer than that. Then reporting and everything starts in that. So having a robust IT support system, if you are having a multi-locational business, is very important. If you are dealing within the country, then maybe you can manage the things. But once you are having communications and all the dealings in this global scenario, when then from the IT perspective, the globe becomes a one unit, not a different countries. So the risk, we cannot say that what is the risk which is prevailing in other region, you are far from that. So that type of situation is there. So having a robust IT policy and IT infrastructure is a must. So building the policies around that is can be one of the strategy. And I think one of the things which are generally ignored in the organization is keeping the people aware. So maybe I think my fellow panelists also talked about this topic, but specifically from cybersecurity or personal data breach point of view, keeping the people aware is one of the most critical aspects. So awareness and trainings is one of the big area where as a legal, we focus a lot. Just leaving such thing to some specific maybe training section or something will not help, because for them, if we say there's a HR section, they are having some training section, they are having many things to do. But from business point of view, the keeping your employees aware about what can be the cybersecurity risks, what can be the data breach risks. So that is one of the important aspects. So these trainings not only just giving a one-way lecture, but making it more of interactive. Like you try to understand the pulse of people, what they really understand about these things or not. Accordingly, design your training programs. So that sort of things are, I think, quite important as a part of strategy to overcome such challenges. So that would be my take on this. Thanks, Serena.
Thank you. In terms of culture, I can say that of course it's always complex, but for me, is agriculture is quite very complex in terms of doing business across the world in the field of agriculture, in the industry of agriculture. So, Deven, can you share with us that is in your experience the actionable tip to build ethical supply chain culture for your supplier, for your group supplier across APAC practice?
Yeah. Thanks, Serena, once again. So I think a very important topic of culture, organizational culture is very important. I think we all have heard, many times that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it is. You might have a very good intent. You might have a very good, roadmap. But if your people are not aligned, your policies are not aligned, then you can face a lot of issues, not just from regulators, but also from reputation risk perspective, especially for bigger organizations operating in multiple jurisdictions. So I think tone from the top is very important. Senior leaders must actively champion ethical standards, not just internally, but across extended supply chain. They should also ensure, leadership should ensure visibility and send a clear message that the compliance processes are not just a checkbox, but it is a strategic priority and which is embedded into our businesses. And even if it would mean that there is some kind of adjustments or trade-off that we need to do, we should be doing. According to me, ethical compliance should be seen as a business enabler and not something which is stopping the business from achieving its objectives. And the management should ensure that everybody understands that this is a differentiator for the company, be it in supplier selection or long-term partnership, etc., rather than a filtering criteria. I would say if I have to choose one actionable tip to build ethical supply chain culture, it should be understanding thoroughly who we are working with. So due diligence, according to me, should go beyond financial and operational checks. It should go into the areas of human rights, labor practices, sanction exposure, political affiliations of our customer supplier, and then also in the area of environmental and sustainability commitments or exposures with whom we are dealing with. So I think for me, in my experience, embedding ethics checks directly into the supplier onboarding means that we ensure that there are certain things that we take care of. Let's say one good example is a supplier code of conduct, attestation. So that means we should ask all our key suppliers, if not all, at least our key suppliers and customers to attest the code of conduct that our company wants to follow. And that creates a bit of a moral check also on them. Then we can also ask for a complete questionnaire on due diligence to be filled in. Again, if not all, at least for the key counterparts that we deal with. And we should also undergo regular screening on regulatory risks like sanctions, etc. And we should also kind of extend the same thing to the entire ecosystem that we deal with. It should not be only with the main supplier, it should deal with broker, logistics service provider, etc., etc. And once you create that ecosystem, I think you can safely say that while nobody is immune from 100% of having a reputation risk or a issue with regulators, but at least you have a very good chance of not encountering those issues. I hope my inputs help, Serena.
Yeah. It's very clear that it's true that in the big company, it's not easy in order to build the culture, especially when the suppliers or the vendor cannot share the same DNA with the group. And then we must base on not only that is the culture of our group or our affiliate or our business, but also the culture of the supplier and the vendors. Because they are the one working with us. And I do agree with you that is we need to have the questionnaire that is a code of conduct. And I do believe that in the big corporation, as that you are working for, we always have the set of the documents we will send to the supplier and the vendors when they are in the process of bidding. And they will be the one to read, and then in order to have a feedback, in order to see that is that they tick on the questionnaire sheet, or they are not meeting the standard of the company. So in that kind of term, not recently, but in just the last decade, we can see that the technology is blooming. And I would like to ask Herumurti, that is, do you see technology as a risk amplifier or a solution for us to manage ethical supply chain? And for example, for about AI. So what do you think the role of AI in our daily operation to help us to manage the ethics of supply chain?
Right. Thank you, Serena. I'm really believe that technology can be a playing bit of both. It's like two sides of the dagger, really. It depends how you are using it, and then the kind of contingency plan that comes along with it. So meaning that yes, it sort of like increase some transparency as well, and then real-time monitoring, so to speak, to make sure all these IoT devices and everything can keeping track of the product itself, product conditions and everything, on the humidity and the location, real timings and all that, up to the safety quality standard, automation efficiency, so on and so forth. But then again, it also works on the other way around, as a risk amplifier, really, because of course it comes along with it that cybersecurity threat definitely is one of them. You have to be mindful, data privacy, and not to mention the mindset of the people itself who's using it is something that we cannot control with, right? So it depends really on how which perspective you looking at, really.
Okay, that is quite. It is true that is the evolution of technology help us a lot, but also is. There are a lot of issues, even in our legal daily operation. I'm sure that all of us here, we are using AI. And let's see how AI is sometimes make the very terrible mistake. I don't know you, but I experience the terrible mistake of AI. So maybe it's amplify the risk, or it's also the solution, depending on us. It's the scorecard, right? So how we use it is in our capacity and is our capability. So I received one question from the audience. So how does the company ensure that key vendor obligations such as data protection, and confidentiality, are consistently monitored and enforced after the contract is signed as a proactive measure instead of a reactive approach. So can you help us to answer this question, Samir, relating to data privacy? And you are working for the digital platform. So,
Sorry, I missed that. Could you repeat that question because I can't read it here?
So how does the company ensure that given the obligations such as data protection and confidentiality are consistently monitored and enforced after the contract is signed? And it will become the proactive measure instead of a reactive approach.
Oh, so sorry if I can understand this. Is the question around how the application adheres to it?
How that is the company can ensure that after the contract is signed, so then the key obligation relating to data protection, data privacy, or confidentiality is protected. How it can be protected? What is the protection measure?
Samir,
Okay.
I think maybe we have all these great provisions in our contracts that we say they will last, they will outlive, they will continue to enforce after expiration and termination. How do we ensure that? How do we check, that these things are still there is actually data privacy obligations or like safeguards in place that we put in the contract?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, there are, again, at the end of the day, we've all seen this in our lives here, that actually, contracts are signed, and then a lot of those contracts actually are put into the locker and they just remain there forever. What is really important is to ensure that the compliance is being done. And I think there are 3 or 4 things that I would say, and especially, when you're working for a digital platform and most of it is digital, what happens is that the easiest way to do this is to have certain processes put in place which actually turn around and get followed automatically. For example, kind of as we were talking about earlier, while, kind of the contract will have rights to audit, the right to monitor and all of that. The biggest problem why these things are left out is because people actually don't turn around and implement the contract in the manner that it's meant to be. Therefore, when we put a right to audit, it is important that, we also turn around and put a schedule for the audit to happen, which means that you are, in a way, turning around and creating, and this is not, while we could say this is not the right way to do it, and I'm preempting that part, but the fact is you have to create a fear of the fact that, we are required to do this. And it's not as if, these contracts is just signed for the purposes of putting it on paper and we go ahead. Well, a lot of people, and we've heard this from business side, saying that, relationships matter, contracts are a piece of paper. Unfortunately, kind of the contract is an equally important part, because the relationship will not matter when things go wrong. And that's when people will save their own self. And therefore, the pieces that we write in a contract, we must put into practice. So if we are saying our contract gives us the ability to actually audit, say, twice a year, we must go and actually audit. Now, what happens is that if there is a requirement to audit and that audit is actually done, then your third party will also turn around and ensure that when the audit time comes, we are compliant with it and we are not turning around and being in violation. That's one. And the second part is that, again, there could be regular trainings and one of the, so there are, while a lot of the other pieces were said, how we can, kind of get to the end of it and ensure compliance, etc. But there are 3 parts which I would add here, right? First part is, I think every company must do it. While we do put an ethics department, we put a compliance department, we do all of that. But pretty much that's reactive and not proactive. And one of the reasons why it happens is because a lot of times the companies will put a person there, or maybe a couple of people who will turn around and really do things when required. On the other hand, if a company is really serious, put a cost allocation to it, put a team to it, and task them for it. And they must turn around and perform, and their performance or their evaluation at the end of the year must be on the basis of what's been really achieved. That's one part, which should then turn around and take it into the fact that there is a code of conduct, there is a certain thing, audit it, check it, and do continuous training. So I, as a company, if I have a certain practice that I want followed, I must ensure that I'm training my suppliers or my vendors also to be able to adhere to it and therefore implement it there. Now, they may be happy to adopt it to get business, but will they be able to implement it? Only if you train them. And so therefore that becomes very important. So in a short answer to this, while I gave a long explanation, is that do cost allocation, do audits, put those processes in place, follow it, and train your third-party vendors also so that it becomes a custom.
Yeah, thank you. It's true that we need to have the random audit or regularly audit in order to make sure that the contract is fully respected. So Deven, do you want to add some notes?
Yeah, if I can add just one point to what, in terms of the data privacy and security, which our panelists have alluded to, I think this particular problem is, of course, universal, but the severity of this issue is dependent on the business model that we put in. We have to run with. So that means if I am talking about an IT company, if I'm talking about somebody who is doing a long-term business, with other companies sharing more and more data and keeping themselves open in terms of exposures, it's a different story. But let's say for a company like L.L.M, for us, data privacy, data integrity is quite an internal stuff for us to ensure. That means we have to, ring fence ourselves from any external attacks, because the nature of the business I'm into transactional business of purchase, sale of my goods and services, etc. And therefore, the data I share with a particular customer or supplier might be limited. Okay, but if I talk about, let's say, an airline company or an IT company giving services for 2-3 years, or a bank, providing service to its clientele, it's a different ballgame in terms of data sharing, etc. So the point I'm trying to make is that the strategy, while the problem is there, the strategy to manage the problem will definitely be different for different setups.
I saw your hand, Shirley.
Thanks, Serena.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. So I just want to add one thing regarding data protection, data privacy, and confidentiality. And the reason for this is because there is a case in Singapore where the commissioner said, if you outsource your data or your data processing to a third party, so for example, payrolls, employment matters, your CRM and stuff like that, and there is a data breach at the supplier level, you as the company that has outsourced this functions would not be responsible under the equivalent of the Singapore Data Protection Act, so long as you have put in place sufficient contractual protections. Now, the very interesting thing is this. I was counsel for one of the parties that got affected by one of these supplier hacks. And in the initial proposed decision that the commission wanted to issue, they wanted to create what was effectively a strict liability offense, such that even if you had outsourced your business processes, your business processes, and even if you had certain levels of protections built into the contract already, you as the holder or the controller of the data would nonetheless still be responsible. So what they tried to do was to say strict liability offense, and anything else basically is an issue of mitigation. We persuaded the commissioner to decide otherwise, but it raises a very interesting question. If that decision had gone all the way through, such that companies were on the hook for their suppliers' breaches of data protection, for their suppliers' breaches of confidentiality, would that have basically created a different market incentive, such that you would have had much more audits, for example, or you would have taken a lot more care in terms of protecting the personal data you control? you can find this case. And what I would say is this case basically involved a law firm, a very, very big tech titan, as well as a few other smaller enterprises. So this was not just a case where you had a relatively unsophisticated company outsourcing its business processes. These are very, very real problems, as both Samir and Deven have already expressed, because at the end of the day, the moment you have a supplier and you outsource business processes, you are kind of at the mercy of whatever happens at the supplier level. And you will never have the same level of comfort as you would have if you were the ones controlling your own IT structure. But the reality is that plausible? And again, we have panelists here from some of the biggest companies in the world, but at some juncture, you have to wonder whether it makes that much sense to try to do everything in-house, or whether or not outsourcing really is the way to go. But that comes with, of course, the attendant risk.
Okay. I hope that this already addressed the question of an audience. So what is, when we talk about now is the evolution of technology and digital platform. So in your opinion, it's an open question for all the panelists. What is, in your appearance, the solution to adapt your company's ethics framework of supply chain to your supplier over the world? What is the practical solution or practical way that is the company can adapt their supply chain ethics framework when we have a borderless digital marketplace? So I will answer the question because it's my question. So I see all the silence of the panelists. I know that it's not in the script. It's an open question. And then, so I just ask, I'm curious, when we talk about AI, we talk about the borderless digital platform, especially for Samir. You work for the game 24/7 and digital platform. So how to adapt the ethical the ethical framework of your group to the supplier or the vendors?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to the same thing, that at the end of the day, your supplier has to be an extension of you, right? So when you look at it from the perspective that who is your supplier? I don't see any of our suppliers or anybody to be a third party, really. At the end of the day, as an organization, I'm able to work because my supplier is able to turn and provide me the services. So to me, it's an extension. And therefore, whether it is ethics, whether it is compliance, whether it's processes, they have to flow seamlessly. And then it goes back to the point that if you have a supplier, how well are you integrating the supplier with you, and how well are you integrating with the supplier? Because at the end of the day, you get into contracts not for short periods. You get into contracts for long-term solutions. You get into contracts where you are turning around and, kind of really expecting a supplier to then be partner with you. Because any contract, and I mean, again, I don't have proof of this, but one of the things that I was taught and I was told is that, and then there is some data that a contract which is run for at least 5 years plus are the contracts which actually derive benefit. Otherwise, a lot of them are just very temporary contracts and don't derive the benefit. And therefore, if that be the case, I would treat them as extensions. I would treat them as parties which are really, together. And therefore, anything that is acceptable to me or something that I want to do and I want to maintain as a standard must be done by the supplier. Therefore, when I get the supplier in, I must ensure that I'm picking a supplier which can adhere to those standards. Ensure again, that they are following the standards and kind of, which has to be purely on a basis where you're working in tandem together. So again, there is no magic formula for this. This takes time. These things are not something which are, kind of done by a magic wand. You get into a contract and tomorrow morning, everything will start to work in a manner which is clockwork. No, it doesn't. It's an effort from both sides to get to the right way, to get to the processes, to get to the trainings, to get to the to the way the information will be done, to the way the protections are built and adhered to. So, I mean, a generic answer, but kind of that's the reality, because otherwise, if you allow, or if you turn around and are in a position where a supplier is turning and following a process which does not match with what you want, it's a recipe for disaster. I hope that answers that, but because I want to keep it generic and I didn't want to get into specifics there.
Is there any of you want to add some notes?
I think I mostly align with Samir. I mean, no matter what's happened, I think your company's values and what it stands for doesn't change, right? Fundamentally, we're in a tariff world, borderless world, whatever. What your company's strategic goal is and how they wish to operate in this world shouldn't change. But of course, I think to pick up on this digitalist, borderless world, I think there are opportunities, of course, to enhance what you're trying to do, right? There are tracking mechanisms and visibility and transparency tools that we have now that we probably couldn't have imagined for many of the panelists here who started practice or who started working decades ago, right? So I think there are definitely opportunities if we would like to make a case for more ethical business practices.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And see, again, sorry, I'll just add to that. The world has changed. And in fact, see, earlier when probably a lot of us started 30 years ago, digitization, etc., was very different. It wasn't really digitization, right? You just had some electronic forms that you had, telephones and etc., etc. But the reality is today the world changes every year. It is no longer a situation where a practice that you do today or something that you fit in today, or you put up solution for a particular problem, it is relevant tomorrow. I mean, very soon a new problem comes up. The way the digitization, the way the technology is moving, these are new issues that come up. New issues need new solutions. They need new ways to do it, and they need on the ball running and getting it resolved, or adhering to it, or putting in the processes. These things can't happen by designing something and then leaving it. So this is a continuous process. It has to continue on a day-to-day basis. And you don't know how things will change tomorrow. And therefore, you have to learn on the go. You have to turn around and devise solutions on the go, and you have to actually implement them on the go.
Yes. So what do you think? Because in terms of this, is that some countries, they, let's say that they don't accept AI usage in supply chain. For example, that is the supplier or vendor using AI in order to fulfill all the document of bidding, for example, during the bidding procedure. So then they will be eliminated. So what do you think about this practice? So is it the ethical methods of supply chain, or is it the intellectual property matters?
Can I take it up,
Yes.
Serene?
Yes.
So I think the question, if I'm understanding rightly, is that why people are not adapting to technology or AI-related things in various geographies. Is it something because of ethical issues or something else, right? So I'll just take a live example from supply chain industry and international trade. So, there is a lot of push for people to move to blockchain environment in terms of the international, supply chain documentation, movement, payment, actions, etc. And it has not, while there is some traction, but it has still not got wider acceptance of digitally moving documents and ensuring, that the payments are done very, very fast manner, secured manner using these platforms. So the problem here is, I would not say only ethical, it is also commercial and business as well. Because as of today, if I am doing business in a certain way, I can have a flexibility of ensuring my payment plan, my document movement, my ownership transfer in certain manner. But the minute it becomes open, the minute it becomes transparent and moving at a speed of light, I lose many of these flexibilities. Okay, and then even my data becomes open to the world. So I think these are some practical challenges that companies face, and unless there is a robust solution, that can be provided, which is acceptable to all, I think it is not just for ethics, but it is also for practical constraint that the business faces, that people are less and less still not very keen to adopt, to technology and to AI. Overall, I would say, especially in agri industries, I've seen that a lot, and international trading.
Yeah. It's same to me. I see some practices that is they reject the dossier of the supplier or vendors using AI, especially in design related services, because for them it's not only the ethical standard cannot be ensured, but also the intellectual property may have some issue, because the AI, maybe they generate something already existed in the system or in over the world, and that belong to the other person is not there. So that's why they don't accept to use any AI products submitted by the supplier and standard. In Vietnam, we have some cases already. So do you have any question for each other? Do you have?
So
Nothing
I
from my
don't
side,
have a.
thank you.
Oh, sorry. Is there someone has a question?
Yes.
So I was going to say, I don't have a question, but I just want to add one very small point, which is that sometimes it makes sense to go back to the old school non-technological solutions. And one of the things that we do find for our clients is that whistleblowing programs, particularly where you have a hotline, which is made known to your suppliers, made known to your employees, and these hotlines are known to be independent, that becomes a very valuable source of information. So you don't need AI, you don't need big data, you don't need like the coolest and latest technology, particularly if there are IP and confidentiality concerns. Sometimes what you need is just an avenue where people are comfortable enough to make those complaints. And it seems to work. Arguably works better than some of the newfangled technology that we see being pushed out in the market. But again, I would love to hear from my fellow panelists who are embedded within the companies and are the ones who are doing this on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thank you, Shaun, for brought it up. I'm really with you on that, because I remember that when I was working for British American Tobacco, we came out with the idea of to put like a hotline numbers where any customers, literally anyone who feel dissatisfied or feel something's off, then they can always whistleblowing to us. And then, of course, we prepared a proper system to capturing all that. I mean, it's going to be escalated to which functions, up to which levels, and all these kind of things. And that helps a lot, really, because in the retail business, like cigarette, fraud, unethical practices is something that we have to deal with on day-to-day basis, really. So yes, it works. Taking that old school approach, we did that.
So, do you have anything to talk to share?
Yeah. If I just add up a bit more point, we're talking about unethical practices. It's really nowadays any company could simply don't want to let these things happen, what you call unethical practices, really, because like in most of the jurisdiction in Asia now, we recognize what's so-called trials by public. So, if there's a case being covered by the media and it's been blown up, and it just, at some ways, it just potentially can, changing the directions of the legal process. You just don't wish that your company to be in that space, really. So you really need to make sure this unethical practices is really, it's really completely sealed up.
Yeah, it's true. I share the same view. As we have one question, and Deven and Samian already shared as well. That is not only that we have the protocol or we have the tool there, but the most important that we need to have the proper implementation of all things and embedded the ethical standard and ethical culture in the daily business operation. So it will relate to the training for all the cross-functional team. It's not only for procurement team or supply chain team. It will involve internal controller, accounting, legal, compliance, at least, and even for the commercial excellence as well, because they are the one to do the forecast for the business to get involved the supply chain. So and also I also share the view, because when it become the risk. And the risks happen in practice, so it's quite severe for the business, and the big impact not only on finance part but also on reputation part as well, and it destroy also the image of the company. Let's say in the work with all the supplier and the vendors. I take one example that is relating to anti-corruption matters. And we all know that if we talk about supply chain in terms of only procurement, so corruption is quite a very painful points, and how to manage is quite a very practical issue. That we could say, especially in the emerging markets. So we set up, we monitor, and then we build up the culture, as Yixin said, and we need the leadership to support our legal and compliance team, our legal expert or external counsel, in order to do our job well. And thank you to all the panelists for sharing such a practical insight. And I'm sure that ethics in supply chain isn't just about avoiding risk, but it's about creating trust and resilience of the business. So let's continue to make ethics as a competitive advantage of the business. That is one of my favorite sentence. That is turn compliance into business advantage. If you see it in my profile, you will see that sentence. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you so much, Serena.
Thank you.
Thank you, Serena.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Everyone
everyone.
have a good afternoon.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you to all the speakers and everyone who's joined us today. We truly appreciate the valuable insights shared, and I'm sure our audience has gained practical takeaways that they can apply within their organization. We look forward to seeing you at more of our GC360 events. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you. Bye bye. Yeah,
Bye. Thank you, Serena.
bye bye. Yeah.